What is going on, everybody? Today, we are finally out of the regular season. Kind of crazy to think about. So, if we want to look over the little records, the seeds, let's just take a quick peek at that. So, Baltimore won the division just because of their division record. So they're third place in their conference. Like Indy, interestingly enough, I think it's because they beat Baltimore, if I'm not mistaken. They did beat Baltimore. That's why they lost the second seed, but it doesn't really matter that much. And then we have just plenty of teams here to look at. I mean, the NFC East is starting to look like. I mean, the AFC East is similarly looking to the NFC East. With wow, that's actually pretty interesting how very close these teams actually are. In terms of like how the wins and losses are spread out. And then we have the power division here and here. We have two power divisions. Again, just looking at the teams here, like we have Kansas City, Denver making out of the playoffs. Vegas barely missed. They barely missed. It's kind of a shame. But Chargers have been getting a little bit of flack for that. I messed up a little bit on the offensive line. And then maybe they had a couple free agency acquisitions. But nothing that would have even changed this because of the fact that we all knew they had an amazing defense. We all knew that. And the offense was the big issue last year, and they got a worse quarterback. And they lost their starting running back. So, I mean, I don't really understand why people can't fathom the idea that the Chargers are going 3-13. They didn't make the playoffs last year with P. Ribs. They're not going to make it this year with Tyrod or Justin Herbert. So, LA, yeah, no. Similar to the Rams, no one's giving me flack on that one, but I'm pretty happy. But still, NFC East is producing the worst contenders here. Philadelphia, especially the Brandon Brooks injury, that wasn't even factored into this. This is starting to seem much more like a realistic record here. And again, this series is without injuries at all. And then New Orleans doesn't make the playoffs. That's the biggest twist in this entire thing, guys. New Orleans misses the playoffs. Not because they suck. They went 11-5 and had a 5-1 division record. But simply because Seattle, Arizona, San Fran are just powerhouses. And so is Green Bay. And that kind of cuts out the ability for New Orleans to sneak in. So it's very easy that Seattle could have lost. But I'm not sure why they got in and the Saints did not. I'm pretty sure they beat some teams that beat the Saints. But still, those are the teams, and we will see. We're going to go a little more in depth because it's only 6 games, and I'm not analyzing each team. So we're going to start on the left side, okay? So Cleveland versus Buffalo. This is going to be an interesting game, but I don't think it's going to be that interesting, guys. So analyzing the game matchup here, Cleveland's offensive line, if Jedrick Wills works out, is comparable, if not better, than Buffalo's defensive line. And Buffalo has a damn good D-line here. So I think that that's an equal battle in the trenches there. Now let's look at the quarterback versus quarterback and the wide receiver core versus the safeties and linebackers. Buffalo, you have Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, Levi Wallace, and then Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, Micah Hyde. They have a damn good secondary. But Cleveland, you have Austin Hooper. You have Baker Mayfield, who I think is going to have a better year this year with Kevin Stefanski. Another big thing. These teams are both coached by amazing coaches. So hoping that Stefanski works out, this is negligible. But you have Baker. You have Nick Chubb. You have Kareem Hunt still, I believe. Then you have Jarvis. You still have Odell. You still have David Njoku too. You have a lethal core here. So it's honestly pretty evenly matched, but I think that Cleveland's ability with Jarvis to run shorter routes and Odell to stretch the field, I think that's going to give Cleveland the advantage here just because the linebackers are still a bit raw. I think that the linebackers' ability is worse than Jarvis's ability, and Jarvis is going to cut up the middle. So I think that's going to be the X factor in this game is Jarvis Landry. So keep your eyes out for that. I'm giving this one to Cleveland, and I said I wouldn't do score predictions, so I'm not going to. But I think that this is going to be a very big spread here. I think it's going to be probably 15, 16 point spread. Just very large amount of point differential. Maybe even 17. I would dare even go to 17. Cleveland, and then let's look at obviously the other side. The Bills' offensive line is pretty solid, but it's nothing compared to Cleveland. Nothing. And then linebacking core and secondary, you have Denzel Ward, you have Greedy Williams. The safeties, you have Grant Delpit there that you just stole in the second round. I think he's going to start. They have Demarius Randall. I believe still. I mean that's pretty damn good secondary. Looking at the linebackers, they have Mack Wilson, who is very raw, but still, I mean he has some talent there. I'm not really 100% sure who they still have at linebacker, but it's nobody who just blows off tape, you know. So I don't know if I think Jamie Collins went back to New England, but still, looking at Buffalo's wide receiver core, you have Stephon Diggs, amazing trade with the Vikings for both teams, and like you have Robert Foster, Cole Beasley, but I think that honestly it's a little bit evenly matched when it comes to wide receivers versus secondary and linebackers, and then tight end Dawson Knox is pretty solid. I think that he's worth the starting caliber tight end, and then you have the quarterback, which is Josh Allen, who's the big X factor this game because I don't think he's going to perform very well versus a good secondary. He's a very big check down machine, but the fact is that you have two man corners on the outside, so it's not like you're going to be able to like check it down and then all of a sudden nobody's going to be there, which I mean can happen in man, but the fact that Cleveland's going to run a very unique scheme to eliminate Josh Allen's passing game is the key to this game for Cleveland. The next game, we have the division rivals, Pittsburgh versus Baltimore. Very interesting. So looking at both teams, defensive line for Pitt versus offensive line of Baltimore, I think Baltimore has a little bit of the edge. Pitt has a great D-line. Actually, I'm going to give this one to Pitt just because the pass rush in general with TJ Watt will be a monster X factor. TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, and Bud Dupree if he repeats his year, because obviously he had a big year last year. Like I think that Baltimore, they lost Marshall Yonda. They still have Ronnie Stanley, Orlando Brown. I mean, they have some solid pieces there. I think they still have Ryan Jensen there, but it's nothing compared to the all-pro D-line of Pittsburgh, and that's going to put pressure on Lamar Jackson. And looking at the linebackers and secondary is pretty weak for Pittsburgh. Apart from Minkah Fitzpatrick. So Minka's going to be the one. I think he's going to get a couple picks this game, honestly. Minka's going to be leading this charge. And then, again, we have to realize that this is where we're at. Cleveland going to Buffalo. It's going to be a much harder game for Cleveland because they're in Buffalo. But Cleveland deals with shitty weather, wind, and all that stuff all the time because they're right on the lakes. So going to Buffalo into a little bit of a harsh climate, I think that it's not going to be too much of divergence from the climate. Pittsburgh going into Baltimore, it's a little bit of a difference. I mean, Maryland versus Pennsylvania, they're close to each other, but not that close to each other, to put it bluntly. But Baltimore is going to be definitely favored with their home field advantage here. Home field advantage is huge for Baltimore. I don't know the statistics on that, but I just know they perform really well at home. I do not like when Pittsburgh has to go visit Baltimore. But looking at the other way, the Baltimore defensive line, you have Calais Campbell that you stole for a 5th-round pick. You have plenty of pieces there, guys. Plenty of pieces. But Pittsburgh, their offensive line, you gotta like take it with a grain of salt here. I think it's kind of even because you have Villanueva and you still have Pouncey and like there's still some guys there. So I think that it's about evenly matched. If not, Baltimore has a little bit more of an advantage here. But where Pittsburgh completely shreds out Baltimore is in the linebacking core. I know they have Patrick Queen in Baltimore, but we don't know anything about him, and I wasn't that confident in his consistency. So I think that Devin Bush is a huge factor here, and then Minkah Fitzpatrick is a beast. Yes, you have Marlon Humphrey, and you have Marcus Peters here, but the safety core really isn't the best in the world. And if Big Ben is here, he's taking shots to the big guys down the field, and that might lead him to some trouble, you know? I think that will lead him to some trouble, and because of that, and because the ability of Lamar Jackson's running, to be able to at least neglect the pass, I'm giving this one to Baltimore. It's simply because the Pittsburgh corners are not that great. It's like The secondary is solid overall, but the corners are the weak point. Joe Hayden's getting older, guys. We can't continue relying on him. And Mike Hilton is a good nickel corner, but we need a second corner to stick on the outside. And Baltimore has a lot of freaking speed, and they have amazing wide receivers. Didn't even mention them. So Baltimore's going to win that game. Next week, Denver goes to Indy in Indianapolis. This is going to be crazy because two very high-powered offenses here. Again, like, the one thing I'm thinking here is Rivers chokes, but he has experience. Like, we don't see any experience from Drew Lock here. And the defenses are very comparable. Both have some very solid defenses. Denver has a better pass rush, but Indy has a better overall defense, in my opinion. So I'm giving this one to Indy. They're at home. They have the good offensive line. They're going to be able to run. And Von Miller's getting older, and Bradley Chubb is a very solid talent, but not game-changing like Nick Bosa. The next week, Arizona, not next week. I'm so used to these other videos. In the NFC, Arizona faces Dallas in the wild card. In Dallas, guys, you already know my opinion. Arizona all the way. Arizona is super high-powered, okay? Like, wide receiver core, super stacked, super deep. Literally 4 wide receivers worth starting jobs deep. And then running back, Kenyon Drake has been doing a great job in that system. And I think that he's just going to continue doing that very well. And I think that's going to be a great option for them. Kyler Murray is a beast. Offensive line continuing to get better. And I didn't even mention the fact that they got DJ Humphries on a contract as well. So they have Josh Jones, DJ Humphries, and then they have Marcus Gilbert. They have things there to mitigate Dallas's pass rush. And Kyler Murray is such a great quarterback that's going to offset the fact that Dallas chokes. Ooh, voice crack. But Dallas chokes, especially around this time. They're going to choke, and it's unfortunate. Sorry, Campbell Wolf, but Arizona's a dome team. Dallas is a dome team. When the lights are on, I trust Kyler Murray to show up more than Dak Prescott, and that is going to be the big deal this game. Both teams are super, super stacked on paper, but I think Arizona just has a little bit more juice, a little bit more oomph, and a better coach. I don't trust in Mike McCarthy as much. The next week, God, I keep saying that. Next game, Green Bay goes to Tampa Bay. Rodgers versus Brady in the playoffs. This is going to be an insane game. Green Bay has a super high-powered defense. Tampa Bay has a super high-powered offense. Tampa Bay has a mediocre defense, and Green Bay has a shit offense. So, I think Tampa Bay they have an amazing D-line. I'll give them that. And their linebackers, like, you have Devin White there. You still have Levante David. Very solid. And then you have a lot of young talent there. I think that Rodgers is not going to have that great of a game. He is the man. He is super clutch. But there's only a certain amount of time. Like I said this about Russell Wilson. I might say it again about him in a second. There's only so much you can do as a clutch player to carry your team before your team lets you down. And I think Tampa Bay is the necessary high-powered offense with the youth and energy on defense and this run-stuffing ability. We saw him in the draft. They drafted Jordan Love, and they drafted A.J. Dillon. Like, A.J. Dillon's not going to do shit against this D-line. You have Ndamukong Suh and Vita Vea, and they still have Shaq Barrett, and I think they have JPP, like, arguably the best D-line in the NFL. So, I'm giving this one to Tampa Bay, and, like, it's also because you're in Tampa Bay, Florida. You're not at Lambeau Field. If you're at Lambeau Field, this game's pretty evenly matched. But home field advantage, Tom Brady in the playoffs, never count him out. The final game, got it this time, of the wild card, Seattle versus Chicago. I kind of gave up on like comparing the teams one by one. That took too long. But Seattle, like they have an amazing wide receiver core right now. Not very deep, but very top heavy and very good. DK Metcalf and then Tyler Lockett are absolute studs. Will Dissly, since he's staying healthy, since no injuries, is pretty damn good as well. And the offensive line's Garbo. You still have Russell Wilson there. You have a good run game, except they are very fumble happy. Chris Carson, I think, got like the most fumbles in the NFL last year. So, yeah, it's gonna be interesting when they face Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks. You still have Roquan Smith back there. I think Danny Trevathan's there as well. Like the Bears are super high powered, and Russell Wilson can only do so much. This is what I'm talking about, guys. There's just sometimes where he can't do enough, and Chicago is the team to put them away. So let me know what you guys think. This is definitely probably not a longer video of mine, but we're going on. We're going to continue to the next weeks and stuff and see what happens. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the far side. Peace.